most recently is the amendment by Andrew Morrison, which would ask MPs to endorse a deal subject to requiring the backstop to expire at the end of 2021. I'm very sympathetic to the spirit of that amendment, but it is unfortunately in direct conflict with the protocol for Northern Ireland, the Attorney General's legal advice, and effectively it amounts to a conditional approval of the deal. If you like, a hit and hope. We approve the deal on the basis of a condition that we know in advance the EU has rejected. I can't see that that is a legally acceptable way to proceed for them or for us, and I think actually it would amount to bad faith in terms of the negotiations. So I think if you're sympathetic, as I am, with the spirit and the intentions of that amendment, the one thing you need to do this evening is vote down the deal, because then it allows and sends a very clear message to Brussels and allows the Prime Minister to rightly go back to Brussels and argue around those things to change the deal. But I don't think we can conditionally approve a deal on the basis of something that has been explicitly rejected. Well, what would happen then if the deal is voted down, as a lot of people are expecting and speculating will happen? I think there, fortunately, is a clear alternative. Shankar has rather magisterially set out the details of it in a number of papers, and he's summarised that in his remarks today. I think politically, my feeling is that for all the rancour that has surrounded Brexit, we need to stand firm, calmly, and with a positive spirit about this. So we should keep the arm of friendship extended to our EU friends and partners, and we should do that now in the weeks up until the date of Brexit, the 29th of March, and indeed, if we don't get a deal with the EU because they don't shift, in the weeks afterwards for the reasons that Shankar has explained. I think eventually, one way or another, we will end up with a deal of some sort with our EU partners. It's just rational, mutual economic self-interest suggests that's the case. But notwithstanding that goodwill and that good faith and that, I suppose, confidence that the process in the end will even itself out, I don't think that we should allow EU stonewalling, and we know the history of EU negotiations is to go right up to the wire. I don't think we should allow that, or their intransigence on substance, to allow Brexit to be the defined or indeed delayed. And we have in primary legislation, the EU Withdrawal Act, a clear date for leaving the EU on the 29th of March, and there isn't anything for all the shenanigans in Parliament that will alter that unless there is primary legislation, and primary legislation can't happen in practice. If you look at the pinch points along the parliamentary process for primary legislation, it can't happen without the government and therefore the Prime Minister backing it. And I think she's made very clear that she doesn't support that. Of course, if we're pressed by EU intransigence into leaving on WTO terms, there will be, in my view, some short-term risks and disruption that we will need to manage. But with proper policy making and preparations, we will be in a position to mitigate, avoid, or manage the lion's share of those risks. And I think if you look at the comments by the Deputy Mayor of Calais about disruption at the border, and that the French authorities will want to avoid that because their own sakes, they want to avoid any of that business going to Belgian or Dutch ports. I think there's some reassurance in the sense that common sense will prevail. I think if you look at the remarks that the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has made, absolutely categorical that we will make sure that the continuity of supply of medicines will keep happening. These are the important measures on both sides of the channel that we can take to make sure that we manage what I'm being honest about. I think will be some risk of short-term disruption in relation to the WTO scenario. There are risks, of course, in all courses of actions that we might choose at this historic crossroads. What I fear most at such a momentous point in our history is that we have a skewed assessment of two things. First of all, the balance of risk and reward in any approach that we take. And secondly, the short versus the long-term perspective. And what I feel has happened in the debate is that it's been absorbed around the short-term risks without looking at the long-term risks and opportunities that cut both ways. I think the opportunities of Brexit, the optimism of Brexit, certainly the hope and that spirit of renewal and revival that fired up people to vote to leave the EU in June 2016 has rather been drained by the tortuous haggle that we've been under with Brussels, but also, frankly, the way the government has approached it as solely a risk management exercise. And I think we need to get a more balanced approach between risk, reward, short-term, long-term. I set out in a speech at the Centre for Policy Studies yesterday some of that more optimistic, aspirational view of what Brexit would look like for the people that, for campaigners like me, we want to see Brexit serve the small business, the start-up, the shareholder, the worker, and above all, the consumer, who stands to benefit in this country if we really take up the mantle of being a global leader in free trade. That's who Brexit is for. And I fear that...
Well, Dominic Raab there making his case. Apologies for the sound quality.